everyone, I'm Victoria and welcome back. Today is True Crime Friday, and you might notice my hair is different from the previous videos of this week. It is because it is now a few hours later. um, but that doesn't change the fact that it is still Friday. So, let's go ahead and get into part 3. I told you guys I would be doing a 3-part series on the 3 cases I know the most about, and have studied and did research and all this other stuff, starting with the Stoddard children, and then part 2 is JonBenet Ramsey, and now we're on to part 3, the final case of my 3-part series of my research. That does not mean that the true crime videos will be going away. That just means that the ones that I know the most about are no longer available because I've already talked about them. But I am excited to know other cases, so let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Okay, so I'm sure you guys have seen by the title of this video, but we will be doing the drowning of Natalie Wood. Now, this is actually a case that I believe took place in between the Stoddard children and JonBenet Ramsey. I want to say probably in the 80s, I think it was in the 80s. So we're gonna see the mysterious, as Buzzfeed Unsolved calls it, the strange drowning of Natalie Wood.
This week on Buzzfeed Unsolved, we discussed the highly controversial drowning of Natalie Wood. Get your sunglasses ready because this one is
this one is all about Hollywood.
Packed full of bright stars.
Yeah.
He had them ready. He didn't even know I was going to say that.
Had them good to go. I'm always ready, baby.
I'd like to say that this story is going to be chock full of terrible Christopher Walken impressions, but I can't say that.
Watch out.
Oh, God.
Boys.
2 mice. Wow.
Oh, God.
All right, let's get into it. On November 29th, 1981, at about 7:30 a.m.
The 80s. I thought this was in the 80s.
Natalie Wood's body was found floating face down in the Pacific Ocean around 200 yards off Catalina Island's Blue Cavern Point. She was wearing only a flannel nightgown, blue wool socks, and a red down jacket. Before we get into the details of the scene,
I'm going to go ahead and say, and I don't know if this is what he was about to say, but I'm going to go ahead and say, Natalie in general, as she was growing up, her mother actually took her to a fortune teller, and that fortune teller told her she was going to die from drowning. Since that day, she had been terrified of the water. She rarely ever stepped foot in the water. So, I mean, the fortune teller wasn't wrong, but it kind of gives you a little backstory as to how Natalie could have gone into the water, why she went into the water, and that, in my opinion, I don't believe she actually went into the water on her own, if that makes sense.
Let's establish what led up to that point. Natalie Wood was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood up until her untimely death.
Unfortunately.
With roles that include the classic Christmas film Miracle on 34th Street, which she starred in only at age 11, Rebel Without a Cause in her teenage years, West Side Story, and Gypsy.
Gypsy.
I will say this West Side Story, even though the new one just came out, the original will always be my favorite, and Gypsy as well. So, I mean, Natalie Wood was such a amazing actress, singer, whatever you want to call her. She was really good, and it's really horrible that she ended up dying this way. And
that.
Oh, the famous Gypsy.
Admittedly, I was like, oh, Miracle on 34th Street, cool. Rebel Without a Cause, great. West Side Story,
classic.
and of course,
Gypsy.
Eerily,
Gypsy
from her
was
early
good.
childhood, Wood's mother was said to have filled her with a fear of dark water. as a fortune teller had once prophesied
I literally just said this, where the fortune teller had prophesied that she would die from drowning.
that she would die of drowning.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. Did her mother bring her to a fortune teller?
I imagine it was like one of those like fortune tellers you see at like a carnival. They're like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if you tell my fortune with little playing cards?
Oh, maybe she'll tell you you're gonna marry a rich man.
It was
she
like-
she would.
You're gonna drown one day.
Water's gonna fill your lungs.
And I
Little
was like,
girl.
all right, we had enough of this thing.
I mean, that fortune teller was not wrong. If that is exactly what she said, she was not wrong. I mean, she did die in a drowning scenario.
Let's go get funnel cakes.
In a chilling incident from when Wood was 10 years old and filming The Green Promise, a bridge rigged to collapse threw her into the water, despite her mother assuring her it would be safe. Wood broke her wrist and left the incident even more terrified of the water than when she began. As a child, she had
didn't
such
know
a
about
phobia
that.
of water. It is
I
said she
didn't
was
know she had
afraid
a
to
phobia.
wash her hair and had recurring nightmares about drowning.
This is
Yeah.
brutal.
Yeah,
It-
this woman was straight terrified. Like, she wasn't just scared of water, she was terrified of water. Like, I mean, imagine, just not being able to drink, not being able to wash your body, wash your hair, because you're terrified you're gonna drown because your mom took you to a fortune teller and that fortune teller told you were gonna drown. It brings up the concept of, would you rather know when you're gonna die or how you're gonna die? In this case, she knew how she was gonna die and was terrified of it.
It came true, so she was actually warranted in all these fears.
Yeah.
This would be like if you were eaten by a shark.
Or a bear.
Oh, I'm sorry.
what?
This would be like if you were eaten by a
I
bear.
thought for a second we were talking about things that are actually scary.
I made the mistake of thinking of the most apex predator, and I forgot that you're afraid of one of the lesser predators. So yes,
No, I'm gonna let this slide because I know you're just trying to get a rise out of me, and you truly do believe that the bear is the most dominant
I truly
animal.
believe that.
Yeah, it's the most dominant all-terrain animal in the world.
Oh,
There's
Yeah,
no-
sure it
it's
he
a
is.
killing
hasn't met a
machine.
cheetah
Yeah,
or
pop that thing
lion.
in the ocean, see
Yeah.
how it does.
On Wood's 18th birthday, she went on a date with actor Robert Wagner, later star of television series Heart to Heart, who was 26 at the time. They married in 1957.
I'm gonna tell you real quick, I don't know if you caught this. She was 18, he was 26. Almost a 10-year difference, but it really doesn't matter because their whole relationship is kind of iffy, and it's very mysterious as to what happened.
But divorced just a few years after. Wood married and divorced another man later in her life, only to marry Robert Wagner once again in
Wow.
1972. Wood herself had said that she believed her feelings of torment were rooted in a feeling that she did not truly know herself, as people had told her what to do her whole life.
Yeah, like, as a child actor in general, I mean, I wasn't a child actor, but I know a lot of child actors do go through stuff like this where, you're constantly being told who you have to be, what you have to look like, what you have to wear, this, that, and the other, and it takes a lot. I mean, you don't know who you truly are because your entire life you are being told who you should be and who you are.
Including her
Like-
mother. Yeah, she seems a lot more tortured than I originally
Yeah.
anticipated.
Wagner must. I mean, does that man have a magical penis or something? They got
What?
divorced and then she.
You think the only reason someone would go back to someone is because they have a magical penis?
I mean, I feel like divorce is probably a lot of work.
Do you not?
I'm sorry. I'm pretty sure people don't go back to people because of a magical penis, but okay.
How love works?
I mean, I could be wrong.
Maybe I don't.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Pushing forward to more recent history of the incident, it was the weekend just after Thanksgiving of 1981. Wood had been working on the science fiction film Brainstorm with Christopher Walken at the time.
I know what Christopher Walken in general just has a creepy face to me, but like this specific picture is kind of
Right.
creepy.
And he was invited to join her and Wagner on their yacht named the Splendor that weekend. According
So, it's Thanksgiving weekend. You've got Robert Wagner, Natalie Wood. I don't know if they were together at this time. They probably were, considering they got married in 1972. The second time, I think. So they were probably together. And then you got Christopher Walken, who you would assume was a really good friend of, both of them. Definitely Natalie, because they were working on the film. But all three of them are in this yacht. And then the captain of the yacht, probably. No, definitely.
According to the captain of the boat, Dennis Davern, who had
See?
worked with the couple for years and considered himself a family friend, Wood had
He considered himself a family friend? Do they think that? Do they know that?
become infatuated with Walken during filming, and Wagner had even flown out to where they were filming to make sure he wasn't going to, quote, make a fool of himself over this, end quote.
This is rough.
To be fair, can you blame her?
Yeah.
I'm actually a little curious about that.
So, with these three people, Robert Wagner, Natalie Wood, and Christopher Walken, there becomes a huge, and romanticized theory that Natalie Wood not only loved Robert Wagner but also loved Christopher Walken, and that her and Walken were together at this point, but they were still together, but this, that, and the other. It's a lot of he said, she said when it comes to the whole, threesome, I guess you could kind of say. Love triangle, I guess. So there's a bit of a love triangle going on, and you're like, going through this entire case, you can sit there and you can think of 20 billion different ways it could have gone, but you're not gonna know for sure, which is horrible, especially because it happened to someone who is so innocent, by the way. Someone who, well, maybe not innocent in, like, a romanticized way, but, like, innocent as in, like, she didn't have to go through this. She did not have to be there and go through what she went through. And there's a lot that gets put on the pressure of that after she dies, and it's not good. No one should, not even Robert Wagner and Christopher Walken should have gone through what happened after her death.
I have a hard time imagining someone going gaga over Walken.
You go gaga
Fair.
over Walken.
I go gaga.
You go.
You know, he's probably magnetic. I bet when you get in a room with him, he commands the space.
Sure.
Yeah, no one's like, oh, Chris Walken's here. Everyone's like, oh, you see who just fucking walked in? Chris Walken.
What a Walken.
Boys, the
Boys.
party's here.
I brought some cocktail weenies.
Oh, God.
Though, Wagner was not the only one with a jealous streak, as around the same time, reports say Wood was suffering from jealousy over Wagner's on-screen romance with his heart-to-heart co-star Stephanie Powers. The group left on the yacht around noon on Friday, November 27th, about 2 days before Wood would be found dead. Everyone on the boat, including the ship's captain Davern, had been drinking for much of the weekend.
And because of this, drinking does play a huge part in this case, which is one of the main reasons it's actually unsolved, is because you don't know the truth because you're intoxicated. You don't know what actually happened. You're intoxicated. Most of you, when you're this drunk, you've been drinking all weekend, nonstop. You're this drunk, you're not going to remember crap.
On that Friday night,
Even though they
Wagner
say
and Wood
they do.
argued, to the point that Davern was concerned and asked Walken to get involved. Walken is known to have refused to intervene, saying, quote, never get involved in an argument between a man and a wife, end quote. Davern ended up taking Wood ashore that night in the yacht's 13-foot inflatable dinghy named the Prince Valiant, and they slept at the Pavilion Lodge Hotel in Avalon. The first time Davern was questioned about this night, he lied, saying that all four of them had stayed on the yacht. The police, however, already had evidence that they had not been on the boat the first night, so Davern was prompted to tell the truth. He went on to say that he and Wood spent the night in the same room, but they just drank wine and went to sleep. Davern also claims that in their relationship, he felt very protective of her and she was
Mhm.
very comfortable with him.
He seems like a good influence.
He
here.
seems like a
Maybe-
good influence. Yeah. So, let me put you in the perspective of how she would have felt in this moment, okay? You grew up, people being telling you who to be, how to be, you know, who you should be with, what you should do, your entire life. You're afraid of something that most people would laugh at. You're terrified. Not only afraid, you're terrified. You've got your ex-husband and then husband on a yacht. You've got your co-star also on the yacht. And then a family friend, which I hope they thought he was a family friend, because you can't just say, I say I'm a family friend kind of thing. But in a family friend he says she trusted very well. So they're going ashore. They go to drink wine. They have a good time. They stay a night in a room. But you got to get back to that yacht somehow.
Maybe.
You could spin it that way, you could spin it the other way. You can see both sides of the coin here.
I mean, if he's removing her from a volatile.
By the way, that is not what I think happened, and I hope they kind of go into what I think happened, because it's kind of crazy if you actually think about it. It's not a normal thing you would
Situation.
think.
Yeah, but the intentions behind that perhaps weren't the most valiant.
The next morning, on Saturday, November 28th, they returned to the Splendor, where Wood apparently decided to stay for the remainder of the weekend, based upon Watkins' expressed desire to stay. Watkin and Wood went ashore that afternoon to begin drinking at Doug's Harbor Reef, where they were later joined by Wagner and Davern. The party's waitress recalls that at dinner, they consumed 2 bottles of wine, 2 bottles of champagne, and one of the men was also drinking daiquiris.
Jesus.
Holy shit.
The 80s
Basically, they were straight wasted by this point.
are great.
Yeah, just going to town. I'd like to imagine it was walking, but
Just throwing back the daiquiris.
he seems like a daiquiri guy. I don't know.
5 daiquiris.
She also recalls that Wood did not eat much of her dinner, and that she did not seem to be in a good mood, and when she left the restaurant, appeared to be stumbling.
So, if you know anything about alcohol, you know that drinking alcohol on an empty stomach is not a good idea. There's not enough food, or, you know, some people even say fat, in your body to consume the alcohol that you were drinking. So, if you don't drink a lot or eat a lot, if you don't eat a lot but drink a lot, you could easily be, one, not only get alcohol poisoning, but 2, get extremely drunk or blackout. And it says she's stumbling, so yeah, that would make sense. And she did stumble, and what the incidents that happened following this proved that she was not capable of being fully there. My hope at the end of this is that they will think the same way as me, and that they at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what happened, but I do hope she didn't feel anything. I hope that at the end of the day, she just, she didn't know what was going on, and that was it. That, you know, she didn't suffer, basically.
In one moment, Wood was said to have thrown a glass down onto the floor, though Walken later explained the incident, saying that it was his fault, because he threw his glass on the floor after making a toast, and Wood had just followed suit.
So fucking Walken is essentially Thor.
Yeah.
I like this drink. Another.
Davern has said Walken and Wood seemed very flirty throughout the dinner. They boarded the dinghy the Valiant to return to their yacht for the night at about 10 p.m. As they were boarding, a witness from the Harbor Patrol office said they heard Wood scream about something, which he assumed was just because she was drunk. Witnesses sleeping aboard a nearby boat, John Payne and his girlfriend Marilyn Wayne, reported hearing shouts at around midnight. However, there was a party going on somewhere nearby, so he figured it was from that and did not respond. Payne claimed to hear a woman yelling, quote, "Help me, someone please help me," end quote, coming from the near stern of the Splendor and potentially from someone in a dinghy. He also believed to hear a man who sounded very drunk respond, quote, "Okay, honey, we'll get you," end quote. But his tone was so mocking, he claims this is why he believed the cries were associated with the party.
Mocking tone. When you say mocking tone, you mean like,
Okay, honey, we'll go get you.
we'll help you. Like intimidating, scary, spooky.
Well, you went a little darker with it. Maybe that's what he said. Or maybe he was just joking around like, oh, go get you. Or maybe this didn't happen at all. Maybe this guy...
This is why I'm kind of hoping she, didn't suffer and that she just kind of, she was so drunk that she kind of just didn't know what was going on and didn't suffer through it. But, that does, as you guys know, that doesn't always mean that that's what happened, unfortunately. But you can hope.
I didn't hear what he thought he heard.
Dude, you just like park next to them? Like binoculars, like a creep.
Star Watcher.
Oh, what's going on?
Natalie Wood's up in that boat.
Oh, she's screaming. Like,
No, I do get their perspective though. John Payne's perspective. If you got a party going on and there's a whole bunch of drunk, like let's say a bunch of drunk teenagers, and yes, I understand. A woman screams, "Help me! Someone help me!" You're gonna pay attention. But girls have also been known to like do it in a mocking way. Like, "Oh, help me, come on, help me," kind of thing. So, I can understand their point of view, not knowing where it could come from.
better take a note about that.
Reports say there was a nonviolent argument aboard the yacht soon before Wood disappeared. Wagner has said that he and Walken did have a political debate that he began at dinner, that they continued while aboard the yacht. He describes the event saying, quote, "There was no fight, no anger, just a lot of words thrown around like you hear in most political discussions. Natalie sat there not saying much of anything and looking bored. She left us after about a half hour, and we sat there talking for almost another hour. Then I went to kiss her goodnight and found her missing," end quote.
And this was the night before. So, you're having this fight, with your friend, whatever. You go to kiss your wife goodnight. You find her missing. You would think the rational thing to do would be to call the police. Immediately. You can't find your wife, you're gonna call the police. Or at least, Coast Guard, I think. I feel like it would be Coast Guard. Anyway, you would at least call someone. But if I remember right, he didn't. So it was the next day when her body was found ashore that anyone knew she was dead.
What are you on to here? Are you just holding the pen and saying,
He didn't notice she was missing till he went to go kiss her goodnight.
Yes.
So that doesn't really line up with the whole screaming woman.
It doesn't.
No.
That's what I'm saying. You kind of don't really know who to believe here.
At 1:30 a.m. that night, Wagner and Sea Captain Davern made a distress call to the Coast Guard,
Okay.
saying that Natalie Wood had disappeared from
Okay, I didn't remember if they had called or not. I guess they did.
the couple's
bad.
yacht, the Splendor. And about 6 hours later, taking us back to the start, the body of Wood was found floating about a mile away from the yacht. The Prince Valiant, the inflatable dinghy, which she had presumably left the boat on, was found washed up on the rocks just a little further south. The ignition was off, the gear shift was set to neutral, and the oars were locked, which implies she may have never started the vessel. The coroner reported that she had drunk 7 or 8 glasses of wine before the incident.
Which is why I'm hoping she didn't suffer.
Her blood alcohol
just
level was
didn't
at
know.
least 0.14, and the police ultimately ruled her death as accidental. She also had superficial bruises on her arms and lower legs, as well as a cut on her cheek, though at the time, these were all attributed to what might have naturally occurred as she fell in the water.
She was a little drunk. I don't know how many. I'm not a big wine guy, so I don't know if
Well, you know what blood alcohol is? 0.14.
0.14 is pretty high.
That's
0.08 is
That's-
You're drunk. You should be.
0.14 means you should be like. That's almost alcohol poisoning, I believe. Honestly, that's almost.
Driving.
You should be
0.14 is you should be laying down.
Yeah.
okay. Well, this is gonna be tricky. I'm interested to hear the theories because it does sound like it could be a case of accidental drowning.
With that, let's get into the theories. The first theory is that Natalie accidentally fell into the
Yeah.
water and drowned. The conclusion drawn by the chief medical examiner in the LA County
But that wouldn't explain the dinghy, by the way.
coroner's office, Thomas Noguchi, was that Wood had fallen into the water while trying to board the Valiant. Noguchi hypothesized that her down jacket had likely become heavy and soaked, but she never thought to remove it due to her inebriated state. Fingernail scratches found on the side of the Valiant show she tried to climb back aboard the dinghy. Eventually, she likely finally drowned due to hypothermia and exhaustion. Ultimately, it's likely she clung to its side as it drifted away from the Splendor. However, Wood's sister, Lana Wood, had this to say on the notion. Quote,
I love that her sister comes in and talks about how she wouldn't have done this. She wouldn't have thought, even in her worst state, she wouldn't have even thought about this because it's right there at the water.
my sister was not a swimmer and did not know how to swim, and she would never go to another boat or to shore dressed in a nightgown and socks. End quote.
Yeah.
I guess if she's spent her whole life being afraid of water
Yeah.
and she can't swim,
Probably put on a life vest.
well,
or
why
something.
would she even attempt to
Or
do
even
this?
attempt.
Yeah, exactly.
In her nightgown, no less. In
Yeah.
her nightgown, no less.
That's why it's strange. I guess when I'm drunk, I
I've done
attempt to,
some stupid things.
I guess I would attempt to do things that I'm scared of. But going back to my theory,
You'll start to notice that with this case, I agree more and more with her sister for multiple reasons. One being, it makes sense. Two, also being that her sister knew her the most, knew everything about her sister, about Natalie, and she would be the one person to sit there and, say the truth, because she wanted her sister's death to mean something. She wanted to get back at what happened or learn what happened. So you'll start to see that I agree with her more and more throughout this.
fear of bears. I would never go, hey, let me go pet this bear.
No.
That's
I wouldn't-
if they go
one of my
into
greatest fears,
her
I think I've said this before,
theory.
is that someone will trick me into doing heroin.
Which is the dumbest fear I've ever heard in my life.
It
I
would
can't
be
even
against
ima-
my will.
How many situations could even put you up to that potential danger?
I don't know.
Yeah.
All it takes
How many
is
parties are you going to with heroin?
none.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
It seems
someone
like a lot.
It's not the fear that I'm at a party. It's a fear that someone would come up to me on the street and put heroin in me, and then I'm
What?
hooked forever.
What the fuck?
Speaking of the
Okay.
nightgown and socks, Robert Wagner also said in a 1986 biography, quote, "It was only after I was told that she was dressed in a sleeping gown, heavy socks, and a parka that it dawned on me what had really occurred. Natalie obviously had trouble."
I want to know how many of you are thinking, oh, he heard what the coroner said, that I all of a sudden know exactly what happened.
Trouble with that dinghy slamming up against the boat. It happened many, many times before, and I had always gone out and pulled the ropes tighter to keep the dinghy flush against the yacht. She probably skidded on one of the steps after untying the ropes. The steps are slick as ice because of the algae and seaweed that's always clinging to them. After slipping on the steps, she hit her head against the boat. I only hope she was unconscious when she hit the water. End quote.
I do hope she was unconscious, but she would not have done this. If she was terrified of water, she would not have done this.
Maybe she did just slip.
It was too close to the water. That's why she always asked him to do it, because she didn't want to be near the water.
Wagner sounds like he's putting forth a pretty solid theory.
Anytime someone has a very hyper detailed
Yeah, that was
account
like
of what
extremely
happened,
detailed.
that makes them
Here's what
free to
must
go.
have happened.
Here's what must have
These 40 things in succession.
happened. Exactly.
However, some have criticized this theory, as the Valiant was a rubber dinghy, which according to Noguchi would make very little noise when they bump a yacht. Additionally, Noguchi reported forensic evidence, including the untouched algae on the swim step. It appeared that Wood may have been attempting to board the dinghy, rather than adjust the rope. Police investigators also found broken glass in the Splendor's main salon, which Wagner attributed to the rough seas, a possible factor in why Wood may have fallen into the water. However, it's here that the testimony of Captain Davern differs. He claimed that Wagner grabbed and smashed a wine bottle after going into a jealous rage over Wood and Watkins' interactions. He claims Wagner exclaimed, quote, "Jesus Christ, what are you trying to do? Fuck my wife?" End quote.
Oh! That's tough. Now, I mean, in this case, if the captain comes forward and tells you this, that would immediately make you suspicious of the guy that just told you, in very, very good detail. Apparently, while he was extremely drunk, by the way, in very good detail, the events that could have happened. But he was drunk the entire night, so.
So you could see where the
All
two
four of
accounts
them were
what
drunk, by
happened
the way.
are drastically different.
I just don't understand
Yeah.
what the captain would have. Why would he make this up?
True,
Yeah.
unless he was, here's another turn, unless he was in love with Wood and jealous of Wagner.
Which I'm pretty positive that somewhere on the internet that is a thing when talking about this case, that the captain was jealous of Wagner and was actually in love with Wood. I'm pretty sure that is a theory that is floating around the internet somewhere. I don't think there's any proof of that anywhere. And I don't believe that that fact is actually true.
See what you can spin anything you want, how you want it.
Damn it, Ryan.
What do you think Christopher Walken said when he said that?
No!
Oh, Bobby.
Bobby. Two mice.
Strangely, despite blaming the rough seas at first, Wagner admitted to having broken the wine bottle that night in the salon in his autobiography in 2009.
Yeah, weird.
So,
It's
things
weird that
not
his
lining
memory
up.
got clearer
Yeah,
almost 30 years later.
Uh-huh.
exactly. Again, it brings up the point. You are extremely, extremely intoxicated. You're not gonna know in very, very good detail what happened. You're drunk.
With that, let's get into the next theory, that there was foul play involving Robert Wagner. Before we move forward, it's worth noting that Davern is an unreliable witness for a variety of factors,
Yeah.
including that it took years for him to come forward with what he says is the truth. Additionally, he seemed to release bits of information to the tabloids in the years following the incident in a relatively unsavory way. That being said, on the whole, many factors of his story ring more consistent with testimony of other witnesses and other evidence. In fact, Walken's description of what happened when they returned to the boat is also closer to Davern's than Wagner's. Walken claims an argument broke out between Wood and Wagner over Wood's time spent away from family, to which Walken defended Wood at first, but then stepped outside rather than get further involved. When he returned,
That's fair. That's fair. You see two people fighting, you're gonna be like, nope.
the
That's
two
fair.
had made amends. Davern also describes events this way, but instead of Wood and Wagner making up, he states he also heard the two continue to argue from where he was on the bridge of the boat, and even claims he heard the dinghy being untied. He claims there was then silence, until Wagner returned at about 11:30 p.m., looking, quote, tousled and sweating profusely, as if he had been in a terrible fight, an ordeal of some kind, end quote. Davern also says that Wagner discouraged him from turning on the floodlights or starting up the engine in any attempt to search for her, saying that Wagner said he didn't want to alert the people nearby.
And if that was true, that would make him the that would make him a murderer of his own wife.
Yeah, I would not want to be this captain.
Yeah.
I gotta say though, after hearing
I also want to know why the captain decided to take Wagner's advice. Like, you want to turn on the searchlights, the floodlights, to look for her, but this guy over here is saying no?
this account, the one person who I didn't expect to just be very innocent, fucking
Walken.
Walken seems like he was just chilling.
He was just, he was just trying to fuck somebody's wife.
Davern has since said that he has always believed something malicious may have occurred to Wood, as he believes she would have never tried to go to shore alone, and feels sure if she did want to return, she would have had him take her, as she had the night before.
Yeah.
Based on new information, including information from Davern, the case was reopened in 2011.
I do agree with that, that she would have never gone in the water alone, let alone that close to the water alone, just because she was terrified. I do agree with that.
In 2012, the LA County Coroner's Office changes the cause of death from, quote, accidental drowning, end quote, to, quote, drowning and other undetermined factors, end quote. The new report casts more questions on the nature of the bruises and abrasions on Wood's body, positing that they likely had to have been on her body before she fell into the water.
Exactly.
Dr. Lakshmanan Satyavajeshwaran, the chief medical examiner,
So, I read about this guy, but I couldn't say his name. I want to hear how he says it.
had to have been on her body before she fell into the water. Dr. Lakshmanan Satyavajeshwaran, the chief medical
Nice.
examiner, said in the report, quote, the location of the bruises, the multiplicity of the bruises, lack of head trauma or facial bruising support bruising having occurred prior to entry in the water, since there are unanswered questions and limited additional evidence available for evaluation. It is opined by this medical examiner that the manner of death should be left as undetermined. And
So, I know there's stuff on the screen, but if you look behind, notice how all of this occurred towards the front of the body. If she would have fallen or fell and these bruises came from the water, it wouldn't just be on the front of her body, it would also be on the back. So, and you might be saying, she could have belly flopped. The problem with that is you still would have gotten bruising on the back due to the force of the water.
quote,
You know why it's good to re-examine these cases like this every now and then? Because the investigators nowadays aren't big heart-to-heart fans.
Was Heart to Heart that big of a thing? Was Wagner that big of a star?
I feel like I'd
I
have
don't
watched
know.
it.
I wasn't
It was about
born
a
in the
husband and
80s,
wife
so
detective team?
Honestly, don't even know.
I'm gonna check it out.
Okay, when you do that, you report back to me.
Yeah.
Heart-to-Heart and Gypsy.
Gypsy, you
These
gotta
are
see
my
Gypsy.
watch
Those
list.
two.
I hope these are on Netflix.
yeah, Shane. Well, I want to know if you watch these. I know Gypsy. I don't know Heart to Heart. You
As of
gotta tell me here.
2013, the LA County Sheriff's Department spokesman Steve Whitmore had described the case as, quote, open and ongoing. Nothing definitive has closed it, end quote. However, he had also previously stated that Wagner is not a suspect. Natalie's sister said, quote, I can't imagine that he, being Wagner, purposely would have done anything to hurt Natalie. However, I know things happen when there is too much drinking and fighting, end quote.
I'm surprised her sister defends Wagner.
Does she?
Yeah.
know? She
Well,
says.
So-
the thing that she said is very interesting about how
So, throughout her whole Lana's interviews and stuff like that, she does come out and say that she doesn't think Wagner would have done it on purpose. That doesn't mean he didn't do it on an accident and just not remember. So, hopefully they'll talk about
when
the
everybody's drunk. I can't
the
imagine
theory that I
ever
think
murdering
happened.
someone.
But
even
I
when you
hope.
drink, you
even-
can't imagine murdering
No,
someone?
I'm saying even drunk. But I ate a pumpkin once when I was drunk. I just took a bite out of a pumpkin.
I just want to say, before, hopefully they'll talk about it, but before we get into that, my theory has to do with Wagner hitting Natalie Wood, so we'll see.
You're a weird dude.
Why is that
Eating
just coming
pumpkins,
from-
afraid of people sticking you with heroin needles. These are
That's a
weird.
rational fear.
That is not a rational fear.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
What are we talking about? Natalie Wood?
I don't know. These are the musings of a paranoid man.
Whether or not he was responsible, Wagner claims to feel responsible in part for her death, in that he did not notice she was gone sooner. Christopher Walken has spoken on the incident as a whole, officially saying, quote, "The people who are convinced that there was something more to it than what came out in the investigation will never be satisfied with the truth, because the truth is, there is nothing more to it. It was an accident." End quote. Dwayne Rasher, the former lead.
It was an accident. He doesn't say how it was an accident, but it was
The
an
police
accident.
investigator on the case still says, quote, "I can't tell you exactly how she got in the water," end quote. In the end, the tragic passing of Natalie Wood will continue to confound the world. The familiar faces involved
They
only
didn't
add to
talk
the
about
mystery, and unfortunately, we may never know what truly happened to Natalie that night, as the case of Natalie Wood will remain unsolved.
Okay, so this kind of makes me mad that they didn't talk about this, and I'm why? Okay, so the theory is that Natalie Wood died by an accidental drowning, sort of, due to Robert Wagner. All four of them were drunk, and Lana goes on to talk a little bit more about this in other interviews, but all four were drunk. Okay? Robert got into a jealous rage, and you can tell that by walking in Davern's statements where they both say that Natalie and Wagner were fighting and all that. It differs where they make up, but I don't think they truly made up. I think they had somehow made it to the end of the to the stern of the ship or the yacht, and he had ended up hitting her profusely and breaking the glass. I do think he did break the glass in the salon. Spa? Anyway, and a piece did cut Natalie's face, and then it ended up moving to the stern of the yacht, and he had ended up hitting her, and he just hit her a little too hard, and she ended up falling into the water. She started climbing up the dinghy to try and hold on, but it just didn't work, and she ran out of breath because she's not used to being in the water. She was terrified of it, so she's not used to being in the water, so she ran out of breath and then unfortunately drowned. That's unfortunately it's not how I wanted her to go out, because I was hoping she would be unconscious, but I don't think that she was unconscious. I think she fell in because Robert had to hit her, and she tried to climb out of the water because, you know, in moments like that, you're going to do everything you can to try and get out. And she couldn't swim. She couldn't do anything like that. She tried to get out. She tried to use the dinghy, and she couldn't. And she ended up drowning. And in the process of her trying to climb up on the dinghy, the ropes got loose, and that was it. Unfortunately, as they said, it will probably never be solved, which is unfortunate. I do think that is the most plausible reason as to putting all the evidence together, whether it's, you know, the bruises and the cuts and the all the different stories put together, and then just bringing out the evidence in general on the, you know, bruises and cuts and how she was found and all that that's the most plausible in my opinion. Let me know what you think down below. like I said, doing a lot of research like this, it leads me to believe that Lana was probably the closest to Natalie and knew the most about Natalie. Not even stuff that Robert knew. So let me know what you think in the comments below. And let me know what you want to see also in the comments below. And as always, have a great and wonderful day. Bye.